Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the sixth and final week of the Clarion West Workshop and Summer Reading Series. My name is Todd McCoy. I am a Clarion West board member and 2010 graduate of the 6-week workshop. It's been 15 years. It's my pleasure to introduce the organization tonight. Before I begin, I want to remind everybody, please say hello in the chat and let us know where you're Zooming from. And I already see a whole lot of people putting their places in from all over the world, which is really cool. Please keep your comments respectful. You will be immediately removed by a sec unit without warning for inappropriate comments or content, and we are serious about that. Please use the Q&A feature for questions. We will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. If you need closed captioning, you should be able to turn captioning on from your Zoom toolbar. And let us know if you have any problems with that at all, and we'll help you out. The mission of Clarion West is to support emerging and underrepresented voices by providing writers with world-class instruction to empower their creation of wild and amazing worlds. Through conversation and public engagement, we bring those voices to an ever-expanding community. This event is the last in the summer series alongside the 6-week workshop. This is the last week of the workshop here. Drop us a note in the chat if you're in the workshop this year, or if you're a 6-week alum from any other year. We'd love to hear from you. We also just finished the write-a-thon, and together we raised over $16,000 to support our free and low-cost classes, workshops, and scholarships for writers from all over the world, which is pretty remarkable. Thank you to everyone who made a donation and who participated in the write-a-thon. Altogether, participants wrote over 100,000 words this year. If you missed it, it's not too late to donate to sponsor a participant. This series would not have been possible without the generous support of the Seattle Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, King County for Culture, the Sherman Family Foundation, and many individual donors. Remember that we're always taking your donations, and thank you for donating. Before I hand the mic over, I want to make the official announcement that the 6-week workshop next year in 2026 will be held virtually again. This decision wasn't made lightly. However, the organization has determined that due to the political climate, strains on funding, and lack of affordable workshop locations, a virtual workshop is the best solution for the near future. If you want to know more about our work toward finding housing alternatives, please visit the housing page on our website. And now I'll turn this over to Jane Steinbacher, our workshop manager, to introduce tonight's guests. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Todd. And welcome, everybody. I can't see you, but I can see there are many, many of you. And it's really exciting to have so many of you tuning in. We hope that you'll check out some of our events and programs. Speaking of, I do have a brief announcement about our 2026 workshops. So our very popular novel writing workshop will come back in 2026. We plan to open applications in October. It will once again be a 9-month virtual workshop running from March to November 2026. And our lead instructor next year, will be Karen Lord. We're very excited to bring her back for this workshop. Our 2026 6-week workshop will be running June 21st through August 1st, 2026. And those applications will likely open December 1st. We will continue running it in a similar style as this year, with staff and special guests teaching the first week and lectures during week 4. Our 4 lead instructors for 2026 are Tara Campbell, Indra Das, editor David T. Moore, and Rebecca Roanhorse. So now I would like to introduce tonight's guests. Kate Elliott has been publishing science fiction and fantasy for over 30 years, with a particular focus in immersive world building and epic stories of adventure and transformative cultural change. She's written epic fantasy, space opera, science fiction, young adult fantasy, and the Afro-Celtic post-Roman alternate history fantasy with lawyer dinosaurs, Cold Magic, as well as 2 novellas set in the Magic the Gathering multiverse. Her work has been nominated for the Nebula, World Fantasy, Norton, and Locus Awards. Her novel, Black Wolves, won the RT Reviewer's Choice Award for Best Epic Fantasy 2015. She lives in Hawaii. She is safe from the tsunami waves at the moment, where she paddles outrigger canoes and spoils her schnauzer. And Martha Wells has been an SFF writer since her first fantasy novel was published in 1993. And her work includes the Books of the Roxora series, the Ilrien series, the Murderbot Diaries series, and other fantasy novels, most recently Witch King. She has also written media tie-in fiction for Star Wars, Stargate Atlantis, and Magic the Gathering, as well as short fiction, YA novels, and nonfiction. She's won Nebula Awards, Hugo Awards, Locus Awards, and a Dragon Award, and her work has appeared on the Philip K. Dick Award ballot, the BSFA Award ballot, the USA Today bestseller list, Sunday Times bestseller list, and the New York Times bestseller list. She's a member of the Texas Literary Hall of Fame, and her books have been published in 28 languages. She's also a consulting producer on the Murderbot series for Apple TV+, which has been renewed for a second season. Please welcome our esteemed guests.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Now we have to like click the things, right?
Yeah.
And appear. Hello. Hello, Martha.
Hi.
So before we were on the air, we were trying to remember when we first met, but we don't remember because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
So,
Did you ever go to Armadillo-Con in
no,
Austin? Okay.
no. The only time I've been in Texas was wasn't there haven't there been two World Fantasies in Texas?
There's been one World Fantasy, there has been two World Fantasies. There's also been two World Cons, I think, in San Antonio. Yeah, so Nina says Corpus Christi and Austin.
So I think I was at a
So
World
there's three,
Fantasy.
because yeah, it was Corpus Christi, Austin, and San Antonio for World Fantasy. And then Worldcon was both San Antonio, I think.
Yeah, maybe there.
Both of them.
Maybe that would have been a while ago, back in the Paleolithic,
Yeah.
as we say. Yeah, pre-whatever. So I just have to say though, that I, like so many people, watched the entire season 1 of Murderbot, and I thought it was fantastic. We've actually discussed this a little before, but I thought I would just invite you to say how you are feeling about how it was and the reception and what it felt like.
I loved every minute of it, and working with them on it and watching it come together, because I got to see the pre-production version and then the post-production version. The pre-production is without the special effects and all the sound and color adjustment and all those things. And basically you see people in the back holding green screens steady, and all the stuff that they take out with the special effects. But I just absolutely loved it. And it's really nice how many people have told me they love it. Because you just don't, until you see people actually make a TV show, you don't realize how hard it is and how so many people contribute to it and creatively. And just we were on the set one day, and the unit PR person was interviewing me, and there was someone over on the next table basically painting the pieces of something. And when we were done, we went and asked him what he was doing. And it was one of the prop people, and he had made a futuristic gun, and then which got exploded in one scene. So he had to make the gun as it was supposed to be, and then all the individual pieces after they got exploded, and paint individually to make it look like it had blown up. And just the amount of work is just so phenomenal, and it's creative work. And I'd seen somebody say that like a movie is when 100 people get together to tell a story, and that's basically what it's like. And it just, you just appreciate all these people so much. It's just when they're making your story.
Well, also the other thing, because I feel like some narratives, some written stories are pretty straightforward you know, if you're going to do Pride and Prejudice, it's not that you can't do variations on Pride and Prejudice, but you kind of, the tone and the focus is it's pretty easy to imagine how you're going to get from the printed page to what you see on the screen.
Yeah.
But Murderbot is, in that sense, it makes perfect sense written. And it's like, but how do you translate it? Because there's always a translation. It's not a direct. And so I was really intrigued by the fact that it's a comedy, but of course there's this entire very deeply serious layer underneath it. And I thought they did a really great job melding those two.
Yeah, I did too. And it's Paul and Chris Weitz were the main people, and I was so they wrote it, produced it, and directed it, and I think that was one of the reasons why the tone is so consistent, because you have it's it's a relatively small number of people making the decisions about what it's going to look like
Mhm.
and how it was going to be, and they're so brilliant and they're so great to work with and so smart and just emotionally smart about
Yeah.
interpreting the work. And like the first phone call I had with Paul, which I think was in 2021, I had to look it up the last, when I was getting interviewed about it and stuff. Because Murderbot is a first person story, and you're trying to take a first person, really internal narrative. I think somebody on Blue Sky said most of it, a lot of the Murderbot stories take place inside software. So how are you going to show that?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and the first thing he said was, well, it's going to have to be different. And I said, well, yeah, it's going to have to be. I mean, we're going first person to basically third person visual storytelling. So yeah, it'll have to be different. And then we just worked together after that. And it was like, I think they realized, oh, okay, she understands what we're going to have to do. And so the way they expanded on the characters and showed you the stuff that Murderbot would never mention because it doesn't care. Having a protagonist that doesn't care about a lot of what's going on is kind of hard, is a challenge. I don't know why I did it. It's really hard. But so, and I love the way they expanded on it, like Garathan's backstory and the things they did. All the little seeds are in there, either in All Systems Red or in one of the later books. And I think it's funny, people say, "Well, that wasn't in the books." I was like, "Yeah, it is." It's a little seed that's planted in there that they picked up on and they expanded.
Well,
So
and that's the advantage of doing it now, right? Instead of 4 years ago. I mean, not
yeah,
that things move that fast in Hollywood anyway, but they have so many to choose from. I mean, not to choose from. They have so many already set down that they can look and say, okay, here's the whole thing. And we can take elements. Like you said, there's the seeds planted and things that you
yeah,
see later that can be, but because they also use the opportunity to flesh out the world. And it's not
yeah,
that it's not that it's not all there, because it is all there, but it's not necessarily, sometimes it's indirect, or you have to put the pieces together in your own mind while you're reading. And they just took that opportunity to, for example, show the factory where they're making the sec units, which was great. And the people talking,
it
to
just
their
how
other, yeah,
dehumanizing the work is and
yeah,
how
yeah.
countless people are treated, let alone how the sec units are treated. Yeah. It just, and yeah, I really like that because I'm gonna complain. I'm gonna try not to complain too much because I like to complain a lot. But so many people have come and said, you know, well, my favorite quote is, I think it was from a review was, why does Murderbot so nervous around the humans? Everyone is so nice to it. And I was like, what? Um, so that's just wrong on so many intersections about, especially considering the fact that it's a slave narrative. So, um, yeah, and just all the things that, because I had talked to them and I shared some articles I had written. There's one that it's in a lit magazine that's not widely, I mean, it's out, you can buy it online, but it's not widely available. And it was basically about it was their bodily autonomy issues. So I wrote a little interview with myself and most it's supposed to be interviewing. It's supposed to be me interviewing Murderbot, and then when I was writing it, Murderbot left really early on because we were talking about people's bodies, and then Art came in, and so I interview Art about this and about Murderbot's bodily autonomy and the email I was getting from people asking about what Murderbot's genitals look like and things like that, and I shared that with
Yes.
them, and so
Oh my God.
people
I'm
were
sorry.
complain about stuff that was put in there very deliberately. And because I told them about that, and I'm not sure if I told them about that before or
Oh,
after the scene where you get to see Murderbot naked. I just
yeah,
remember
yeah.
we're going to show Murderbot naked, and it's just going to be like, it's just, you're going to see that it doesn't have anything. Um, that's that's one of my favorite scenes actually, because because it's like I got really tired of the question, but what gender is it really? And people would say, it doesn't have a, I know it doesn't have a gender, but what gender is it really?
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I did see before the show came out, there was, as you know better than I do, a lot of speculation who were they going to get to play it and whatever. And I will admit that I didn't care. I didn't have an expectation of gender. I just wanted the right, what's the word I'm looking for? It it had to have the right feel,
The
right?
right vibe.
It had to, and I want to say that maybe a Scandinavian was perfect after all, because no one can be mopey like a Scandinavian can be mopey. I say as a Scandinavian American, and so that mopiness is so funny to me,
He did
because
such
I
a good job of like
did
completely
such a good
pulling
job.
back, and yet you
Yeah,
could tell how just basically totally annoying and agonizing Murderbot found everything that was going on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
It must.
the voiceover was so good.
It was wonderful, wonderful. But I want to come back to something else you said, because it's so interesting to me, as since I know you've done this before, but you said you wrote an article in which you interviewed first Murderbot and then Art. I have to say that that is something that I've, well, I know people do that, and I'm so like, it's so orthogonal to how I deal with my writing and my character. So how do you have you always done that? Interviewed your characters, or is it something that you just found that you could do or liked to do?
No, but I haven't always done. That was actually the first time I'd ever done it. I guess it's the first time I ever
Oh,
had a character that would actually talk to me. I don't know, but
okay.
um,
Okay.
um, I just always been able to always talk about characterization as sort of like taking someone else's software and running it on your hardware. So,
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for some reason, Murderbot and Art are very easy for me to separate out, that I can do it quickly. I think
Hmm.
interviewing some of my other characters has been incredibly difficult, just because I don't know. I think because I haven't written them in first person. So I'm used to Murderbot talking in first person, and then Art might as well be. I don't think I'm explaining it well, but uh,
No, no, I think it's good. I think it's good. Is Murderbot your first person
there
character?
was one other short story I did ages and ages ago that that's kind of it's called Thorns. It's really short, and it's just a retelling of sort of like Sleeping Beauty from the witch's point of view after years and years and years has gone by, and here's this wall of thorns things with the castle and the sleeping people, and she's stuck with it. And that's the only other time I've written first person where it was actually successful enough to like actually show it to people and sell it and stuff. I tried a few times before, and it just always felt like I couldn't, I didn't like the voice. I couldn't really get the characterization across the way I wanted to. So it just surprised me that that Murderbot turned out so well in first person, and that was so clearly the voice it needed to be in.
Did you like when you started writing it, or however it began, was it always in first person? Or did you
Yes.
experiment with different points
No,
of view?
it went very smoothly. Actually, there's something else I've been trying. There was a book I was trying to write first person with different characters that was more fantasy, and wrote the first part of it really fast and then just derailed myself right into a corner. And then later, like, I actually like even went so far, I sent it to my agent and she liked it. And she's like, there's some problems, but you can figure those out. And then I got myself stuck, and then I started doing other things. And it was long enough that after I figured out, oh yeah, this is what I should do with it, that was where I went too fast and went the wrong direction.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
was sort of too late because I moved on to working on other things, and I kind of lost the oomph for that one. But yeah, and I don't think I started working on that until after I'd written Murderbot. So maybe, I don't know.
Oh, so maybe that even came afterward.
Yeah, it may, no, maybe I think it was before. I think it was after, it was pretty close to that. I was telling one of the participants today in the workshop that I don't think I could have written Murderbot, you know, 10 years ago, or it's almost 10 years ago now, but 15, 20 years ago. I just think I needed all the experience of all the other books I wrote to be able to do Murderbot and to be able to do Witch King. And I think Witch King is a result of me pushing myself with Murderbot, with the POV and the different logistics of having a POV character that has to keep track of 9 or 10 things at one time, 9 or 10 viewpoints at one time, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think sometimes people, I think about this a lot, which is that I don't really think that any writing is wasted, because even if you write 50,000 words, you write a novel that is unpublishable, or you write a short story that you stop halfway through, or whatever, that writing is still part of the accumulation of what you're doing that gives you the experience. And because there's stuff that I could not have written.
Oh yeah.
Why didn't you start with this book? Well, I couldn't have written this book. I sometimes talk to people who say, well, I'm waiting to get good enough to work on this one idea that I have, but I don't have the skills yet, or the
Yeah.
chops yet. And I think that it's important. I always think it's important for people, especially emerging writers, to think about that. This is all skill building.
Mm-hmm.
However
Yeah.
successful a book may or a story may or may not be, it's also building the skills to make that story better when you revise it, but also to then, use what you learned doing that to do the next thing.
Yeah. It's like building structures in your brain. I mean,
Yeah.
you're teaching yourself as you work on things. So yeah, nothing's wasted.
Yeah, and I sometimes think, like, if I start working on a book, whatever I may have in mind for it, sometimes I'll also think, that last book I really struggled with pacing. I felt like the pacing was a little off. So I'm going to really work on pacing on this. That's going to be my craft focus. So I'll pick like one craft. Not that I'm not working on the other parts of craft for the books, right? Obviously, you want to make them the best you can at that time in your, whatever phase you are in your writing level. But sometimes I'll really focus on one thing. I want to, not have too many details in this one, but just the right details. And this one, I want to make the pace really snappy. And this one, I want to do, something else, whatever. And I try to like do that with the different books. So it gives me a challenge with each book. So I don't feel like I'm like repeating myself constantly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to write another book like that last book I wrote. I never want to do that. I
Yeah.
always want to write something that's different in some way, not different in some way that it challenges me as a writer.
Yeah, I do too. And I had a thought and it left. Um Oh, I was going to say, like my third book, The Death of the Necromancer, writing that just almost broke my brain. And I had no idea it was going to be that hard when I started it. But I think I'd never written
Mm,
um, a mystery, actual mystery like that before. And I'd never written a plot as complex. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and it ended up being long, very long too. And there were times when I was just like, I don't, I don't know if I can do this, which is weird. Is not something I ever expected, um, because I had a very clear vision of what I wanted it to be. It was me being. There was a lot of sort of Victorian era, La Belle Epic era with magic and sort of
mhm,
supernatural mystery, and I couldn't find one I liked. It's like this is the kind of book I want to read, and the one I tried to read was just terrible, and it was sort of that. Well, I have to. Somebody's gonna have to write this. It'll be me. And it seemed such a clear idea. It was like incredibly difficult in execution. But now I think it's like an athlete where you work up to certain levels,
yeah,
and push yourself further until you can
yeah.
go to the next level.
Yeah, because sometimes I think about books that wrote fairly easily. And I think those are the ones that I'm writing on what I have, on the little ladder climb I did
Yeah.
just before that, right? And they're like, oh, okay, I really get this. And, and then I'll hit a book that is just so difficult. And it's like I'm wrestling the whole time with it. And sometimes it's frustrating, well, I mean, it's always frustrating. But other times I think to myself, well, there must be something I'm doing different here that I'm not really fully aware of. So this is teaching me something. I don't know.
Oh,
I may
yeah.
not know what it is for 5 years, but it's got to be hard for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it really gets back to no writing is ever wasted, because everything you did, it contributed to you learning, your brain learning how to do these things. Oh, and I told you, I think before we started, I read The Witch Roads and I really loved it.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
really loved and I can't wait for the next one.
Well, fortunately, I wrote it. It's a duology in both. Fortunately, they're both done. So they're both, the other one's coming in November. So
In November.
no long wait for me to finish it because it's already done and in production and coming. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just I don't want to spoil it or anything, but yeah, the whole concept was so cool, and so easily visualized, I think. I just had really, it was really easy to see it, and it's got a lot of stuff like strange, mysterious ruins, you know.
One of my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah,
tropes is strange, mysterious ruins.
yes. So that was really, I really just really enjoyed that. But I've
Oh,
enjoyed
I'm so glad.
so much of your work because I really like Cold Magic, the Cold Magic trilogy was my favorite for a long time. And now I've lost the name of it. The ones you did after that that was set in more the desert world.
Oh, Court of
Game. Court
Fives?
of Fives.
The young adult, yeah, the young
Yeah,
adult
those were,
fantasy
yeah,
trilogy.
yeah. Those were some of my favorites.
You know, that's when research can be fun because that was influenced in part by um, the Ptolemies in Egypt, who were just about the worst people you could ever know. They were so awful. And I picked some of the least terrible things they did to put in that book, and they're so awful. It's like, oh my God. So the thing about history is like
It's worse than anything you can ever come up with in your imagination. It's
in
just
on your
horrible.
own, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I think history is such a good thing for writers to read because it's like opens this world of of all these things humans do. Um, and most of us are writing about humans or something human adjacent.
And the frustrating thing is fantasy when you have something that you took right out of history, that you borrowed right out of history. And then people will say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? And it was like, because they did it.
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
there with like way back with Element of Fire, which was my first novel. One of the little plot things is finding uh, these manuscripts that were copied by monks, who copied the manuscript and it's in a language they didn't read, which of course was 99% of the
yeah.
medieval manuscript copying in the real world. And someone was like, why would you copy a language you didn't read? And it was like, do you think they had Xerox printers or something? It's like, what? The
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
sometimes people send to you that are so frustrating.
Yeah, one of my favorites was in the very, very, very early days of Amazon was when the early Crown of Stars books were coming out. And when they first started having reviews, which was so interesting. Early Amazon reviews were very different because today they're like a commodity.
Mhm.
But back then, they were a way for readers to express their feelings about a book that didn't go through. Usually the reviews you saw of a book went through gatekeeping, though. They were in, a reviewer who reviewed for a magazine. So that's one person's opinion, or maybe a couple people at a magazine, or someone who is prestigious enough to review for a major newspaper. So the viewpoint you would get about books was in a way very narrow. And I like to say it was gatekeeping, right? But on Amazon now, anybody who had read the book could say, I really like this book because whatever, or I really hated this book because whatever. But I always was so Crown of Stars is set in on an alternate Earth, but it's very heavily based on early medieval Europe. So it basically 10th century Germany, or they wouldn't have called it Germany then, but whatever. Um, and someone wrote a review that said, this writer clearly didn't do their research because their armies are really small. Like sometimes they're like only 1,000 people. And, the Romans were marching around with, legions of tens of thousands. And I'm like, wow, there's someone who really doesn't know their early medieval history. Because I was right and they were wrong, but they
Oh,
were
yeah.
going with it's that other thing, that other element, right, that we have to deal with as writers, which is people's expectations. They bring their assumptions in, and if what you're writing doesn't fit your assumption, then you're like, well, there's something wrong with this book. You
Yeah.
never think it's a lot of times people don't think to challenge their own assumption. Well, men and women behave this way, so why are they behaving that way? That's wrong. But maybe this way is just a whole mash of gender essentialism that someone just
Yeah.
absorbed and never challenged. Um, Whereas actually people have behaved in very diverse ways throughout history. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing I think as writers that we grapple with all the time is that readers bring their experiences in and they don't always mesh with what they're reading.
Yes. It's very annoying.
We see that all the time. Oh, it was like Superman was never political. Why are you making Superman political? Wait, wait a
Why are
minute,
you
wait.
making Star Trek woke?
So why are you making Star Trek woke? I was like, have you seen the original
Yeah.
series? Like, could we stop a minute? But yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well, I know. Um, what are you working on next? Oh, I was gonna say I also really like the Furious.
Curious
It's
Heaven.
Unconquerable Sun and Furious Heaven. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
those are my big fat space opera novels.
so I
Or
really,
as we say, gender bent Alexander the Great in space.
yes.
Because why wouldn't you want to put Alexander the Great in space and make him a woman? So I did that. And that's another one that's interesting to see because sometimes people know the history and they can see what I'm doing, but other times people think they know the history
And they
and,
don't.
and
Yeah.
they don't. And so they don't get some of what I'm doing, but I guess because I use history a lot, I think as you do, but that's something that kind of I think about a lot, which is how much, and my own expectations too, how much my own expectations feed into how I write things, and that kind of my own expectations, if I don't think about them or really try to examine them, they can kind of trap me in a certain kind of writing
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
One of the cool things, there was a conversation, it would have been years ago now, but about why we perceive fantasy cities as being so like sort of, dirty and dangerous
Oh.
and all these things, and why, and was like, okay, because I was getting ready to write The Gate of Gods probably around that time. And I was like, I'm going to make a fancy city that's really nice. And it was I think it's the Kishan city. Can't remember where, it was a long time ago. I can update
No,
it
I feel you.
yesterday. But, I gave it had basically free hospitals, it had mass transit, similar in various versions, and which is just really a cool thing to think about is why. And I kept that up for Queen Demon, which is the sequel to Witch King. It's coming out in October. It's up for pre-order now. And describing basically their present day Benai Arik compared to, and it's the comparison you see is when they first arrived in the past, during the first initial bit of the rebellion, of leaving destroying the summer halls and coming and going there, and how, messed up the city was. And then the modern version, which I wanted it to be, or their version of modern, I wanted to feel like this is really a place I'd like to live, even if it doesn't have, electricity, whatever, but make it, so it's not the visions of different sorts of human, reasonable, not surreal human habitations and existences are important for our imagination, even if it's just in
Yes.
fiction.
Yeah, I think it's important. I really agree with you that it can be important to write cautionary tales and dystopian tales and
Yeah.
tales about, resistance and rebellion. I think those are crucial to people, but I think it's also important to vision good outcomes and, work that people can do and ways that people could be living. Because we need something to aim for as well. And that people have. I mean, when the Spaniards reached Tenochtitlan, they were like, "Oh, nice is this place, and everything's orderly and it's clean," and as compared to wherever they were from in Spain. So actually, there have been places that were significantly nicer than this stereotype of the dirty, messy, grimy fantasy city.
Yeah.
In
Well,
different places of the world.
Mohenjo-Daro that had plumbing,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like showers and things.
Early Minoan Crete had plumbing
Yeah.
in their cities as well. Well, or what we
So
think
many
is plumbing.
ancient cities had plumbing, and it was just like it's not that they didn't have the imagination and everything to invent all this stuff. It was that there was sharing information was so limited.
Yeah.
So when you have the internet and phones and all that kind of thing, when somebody invents something and it gets published and sent out to the world, that doesn't happen back then. So you lose so many things. So you're not building.
Or you would do what the Spaniards did, and they come over and go, "Oh, this place is so clean. Now let's, destroy it and kill everybody," right? Because we want the gold. So
Yeah.
they're coming in with this idea where they don't care about all those
Oh
other
yeah, they just
people.
wreck. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Everything.
it's the wrecking mentality, and that's actually kind of also part of that idea of what maybe we could envision things where people don't want to wreck things. That's not their
Don't
main
ruin
goal,
everything
that
all
they
the
want to like make things better for
Yeah.
everybody. There's a great fantasy.
concept.
Yeah, there's a great, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a complaint about Unconquerable Sun. I have someone mention, so it's in Unconquerable Sun, which is the space opera, it's based on the life of Alexander the Great. With all the names changed, and it isn't exactly the same, but it's pretty much the same. But at one point, the Chaonia, which is the Macedonia analog, one of the prince's companions or princess's companions is makes some comment about, I don't know if it's, I can't remember now exactly what the context is, but this very in Chaonia, all healthcare and medical care is free. It's provided by the state. And this character says, oh, there was this show, I guess they had to, someplace they have to pay for it. That's so weird. Why would you do that, right? And some reviewer was like, oh, that's just a political thing. People put it, that the author has put in there to be woke, right? It's always woke, right? But the thing is, because I don't say this explicitly, but the thing is, Chaonia is a militaristic society. Well, you know what you want to do when you have a militaristic society where basically everyone serves in the military? You want to make sure that if they're wounded, they get health care so they can go back out on the lines. So it's actually to their benefit. So sure, it's nice. I think it's nice. I would like that in our country, which we don't have. But there's also you can also see that there's a utilitarian side to it, even a darker side to it, if you look at it in all these from, all the way around. And that's one of the things that writing is so great for, but that speculative fiction is so great for, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt this really interesting conversation, but I am noticing we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Do you want to move on to answer a few questions?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. I'm going by the voting system, so I'll start with our most voted at the top. And I think this is a great one. As authors, how do you each balance real life stuff, like needing to shop for groceries, making dinner, dealing with home repairs, without losing the creative flow needed for writing?
I guess I'll start. I write full time now, so that gives me time to do stuff, and it gives me time to like do my errands during the day on the weekday when it's easier because there's not that many people. I don't have to like compete after 5 in rush hour, go into the grocery store with everybody else. So I just don't. It's been that way since around 2006 or 7, something like that. So I haven't, so it's pretty easy, I think. And I can only write a certain amount of time per day before my brain just stops. So so it works out pretty well for me.
I will say that when I was young, and working, I would like find a 4-hour block of time and go to the library so that I could be uninterrupted, work without interruption. And then I sold my first novel when I was pregnant with my first child. And I'll tell you that what happens is either you stop writing because you can't. I have 3 children, that first child, and then less than 2 years later, accidentally, identical twins. And so I had, for like 5 or 6 weeks, I had 3 children under the age of 2 and a book due. And so I learned either you don't write because there's so much going on, or you learn to switch it off and on. So when they were little, I learned to switch it off and on. And one of the things I would do, one of the tricks I used was I would try to stop somewhere where I knew exactly what had to come next and write a couple notes, and then, she opened the door and then, you know, so and so is standing there with, you know, a sword ready to cut or whatever. And so then it was like, okay, now I'm going to have to go deal with all my other things. And that allowed me then to come back when I next had a time, whether it was 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, that I could come back down and say, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing right now. I know exactly where I need to go next. So I didn't have to that kind of like, okay, what am I doing now? It can take, you know, an hour, 2 hours to like gear up to going, which is one of my struggles now, because my kids are grown and now I have more time, and it's almost in a way harder because I waste more time like going, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay, now I've finally gotten started. So I think just training yourself to switch in and out. But the other thing that I learned to do is to not care how bad the first draft
Yeah.
is. That to me is the most crucial thing. I don't care how bad it is. Once I learned how to revise, I was like, this is really terrible, but I know this scene basically has to be here and I can revise it when I'm done. So I'm going to get to the end of this book and then I'm going to worry about that. Oh, interrupted? Okay, I'll come back later. You know, so those would be my two advices. And part of it is just sheer stubbornness.
Yeah.
I have
Oh,
another.
well, hold on.
Oh.
There's one more thing I want to add to that. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes an emergency happens, something happens, you can't write. Never beat yourself up for it. That's my biggest advice to people. Please don't beat yourself up when you didn't get that thing you wanted to get done, because sometimes life just gets in the way and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There's another question for both of you, and then I'll move into some more Murderbot focused questions. Do you have suggestions for editing longer stories, for example, strategies for novella, novel editing, for someone comfortable revising short stories?
I don't, I do a lot of revising as I go along. Like when I'm actually writing first draft, when I'm getting ready to start the next day, I'll usually go back and read over the previous section of what I've written. So I do a lot of revising as I'm going along. So I don't generally have a lot of problem editing, you know, my own work until, you know, and then it goes off to the editor and you then go back and revise on their suggestions and stuff. And I've never, just the difference between, I'm trying to remember back when I first had to do it. And usually one of the things I did when I got an edit letter from the editor is actually retype a list in a file of all the things they had suggested or things they pointed out needed work, and kind of almost do it like if it was just like a paragraph, and most of them would be like one paragraph fixes, one sentence fixes, and kind of put them in there, and then go through the book and layer those in, and then, you know, then start reading the book from the beginning to make sure everything worked and fit in. But that was something I did, you know, my first probably decade and a half of writing novels. Now it's pretty much, by the time I turn it in, it's pretty well the way it's going to be published, except for some polishing sometimes. And sometimes that's not, I mean, with the Murderbot I just finished, I ended up making the ending a little bit longer, because when I got there, it's like, yeah, this is not quite right. It needs to be fixed. And with Witch King, my editor had more suggestions, and one of them for when he saw the first draft was making one of the character, like making Taran more prominent as a character, and I realized, yeah, that did pull the plot together. Sometimes with a book that's really complex, you do need you can't see the forest for the trees, and you need fresh eyes to come in and kind of tell you. If you just pulled, the stuff is in there, and if you just made a harder point of it or pulled these strings a little bit more, everything would come together better. So I hope that answered you.
I've actually thought about this a lot because I mostly write novels and I rarely write short stories, which to me, short stories are this mysterious thing that I don't understand. Really, I don't understand short story ideas because I don't get them very often. But there's a couple of, I could write a whole trilogy about this, but I won't. I think part of it depends for a person in how many novellas or novels they've written, because as Martha says, as you do more of it, you're doing a lot more without consciously thinking about it. So by now I can structure novels without, there's not a lot of like front of the brain structuring going on. A lot of it is going back here, and I can kind of feel my way through, this is working, this isn't working. And I don't really have to think about it consciously because I know the structures. I know how structures work now. But one thing I do when I think about a novel is I think about it, to me, it's like levels. So you've got like the biggest picture, so how is the overall structure of this book? And that's like the first thing I'll look at. Do I have the main points I need in the places they need to make the end match the beginning, not in terms of like exactly, but like the what happens at the end then is what happens at the beginning. You can see how they touch each other somehow thematically or plot wise. And then from there you go down to like the chapter. These chapters framed the right way? Are the scenes framed the right way? Are conversations within the scenes flowing the right way? Have I repeated conversations, in chapter 2 and in chapter 9 when I could consolidate them, or pull out half of the conversation from 2 because and then where does this conversation fit best? And then you come down finally to the kind of line editing where you're polishing it. So it's kind of like big, smaller, tighter, and I don't line edit at the beginning. It's not that I don't fix things I'm writing as I like, oh, wow, that sentence doesn't make any sense. I might, do what, the next day when I start in, I might look back and say, oh, let me fix that sentence. But I don't line edit as I go, except for those kind of things. I always start with big picture. I always, I've got to go down like that. So thinking of it as layers or levels, really, I think is helpful. And then for a trick that I was told when this was on Black Wolves, my editor was Davy Pillay, who Black Wolves was a very complicated story, multi-point of view, and it had some moving around of time. It had some time jumps, like Witch King. But she suggested that I create in a notebook a backward outline. So I had a first draft, write a backward outline. So I did a backward outline by chapters, and then I put down what happened in each chapter. And then once I had that, I was able to figure out, wait, this needs to be introduced here. Actually, it works better here. And then I wrote the notes to myself, like you did, right? The notes to myself to where I wanted to do and where I wanted to change things, what I wanted to put in things, what I wanted to pull out. Then once I had that notebook, my backward notebook done, then I just flipped it over and then I started revising. And it actually it's the only book I've done it for, but it worked really well for that one. So sometimes it's just a matter of finding like a structure for the revision that works for that specific book.
And sometimes it's just you've been over it and over it, so sometimes you can't see it. Like with The Edge of Worlds, which was the fourth book in the Raxura series, turned in the draft, and the editor said, yeah, the first 200 pages feels long. And so I went through and found, oh yeah, I can trim. So I trimmed in the first 200 pages, and then turned in that And I thought I'd fixed it. And he was like, it still feels long. And I was like, no, it doesn't feel long. And then I had a friend read it, and it was Nora actually. And she was like, yeah, this feels long. And I was like, I have screwed up in here somewhere. And I was reading over it, and I finally realized, because the structure had not come together easily. And a couple of times I had started it in the wrong place and had to backtrack and then push back where I was. And I realized that I had two characters having a conversation where they basically talked about all the stuff that had happened in the previous chapters, because originally those chapters weren't there.
Oh,
And so I was looking it
yeah.
over, and I was like, but I like this conversation. I like this one line. And then I thought, everything else can go except that one line, and tag it on to the previous scene. And it's like, that's why it feels, and it's like, and nobody could pinpoint it. They just knew that something felt really weird and
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
And it was going
yeah.
on it felt like it was too long, because they were sitting there with two characters, and I'd written the dialogue very engagingly and funny and everything, but they're talking about stuff you already know, that you just saw happen. But it was just, nobody could pinpoint it. It's just like, I'm so glad I figured that out. And so they're just reading it over and over again, it finally hit me that it's like, wait a minute. And it's like the revision artifacts are sometimes what those are called, where you have something one way and you change it,
Oh, yeah.
but bits and pieces of it are kind of still in there, kind of gumming up the works in places.
And if you're lucky, you find the last of them in the page proofs and get rid of them.
Yes.
And if you're unlucky, you get the finished novel and find one
Yeah. It's
that you didn't. Hopefully it's a really minor one, but yeah, that point where you change like 2/3 of the way through, you think, wait, it's really this secondary character who is the henchman of the evil villain. And now I have to go back and make sure that's all set up correctly.
Yes.
And then did I do it right, or did I leave something out? Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, since you were talking about the series, we did have somebody ask, the world building in the Raxura books is so rich. Do you create the world first and then write the plot, or plot first and then the world grows organically around it?
Um, I usually kind of create the plot and the world as I go along, because I feel like you can't pull out those elements separately. The world building is integral to the characterization and to the plot and to the story. It's all just intertwined. And so I don't feel like you can come up with these elements separately. At least I can't. For the world building specifically in the Raxura books, when I wrote the Cloud Roads, I really wanted to, because my other fantasy had been very based on, even though it was secondary world, it was based on historical time periods. And for the Raxura, I wanted to do something just really more freer, more less constrained by the research I was doing and stuff like that. So I just started it, and my rule was, whenever I'm describing a new place, is step back and think about how I could make it weirder. So one of the examples in the Cloud Roads is, at one point, two of the characters, Moon and Jade, are traveling, and they're traveling through the mountains. And originally, when I wrote the scene, they stopped in this place that was just kind of like a primitive camp, logging camp or something like that. And I thought, no, that's boring. Let's make it a town. Well, let's make it a city. Well, if it's a city that it's like it's mountains, maybe there's like underground, seismic or like hot springs or something like Yellowstone. And then I was like, what if that's how they use for their power? They use this, like the steam and stuff, and actually convert it into power. And it's like, well, what if the whole city is now turning like a wheel? I think I went from having a giant water wheel to having like the city that's just turning on this platform. And so I tried to really push myself with each place and try to make it, um, just as strange and weird as I could.
I love those. I love those books so much. I still think that's one of like the three best world building creations in the history of SFNF. I mean that quite seriously.
Well,
That's
thank you.
spectacular. And there's a good lesson in it too, which is that you can always double down. A lot of times it's like, oh, I back off. I don't want to be too weird. No, be weirder.
Just double down. Just always.
Double down. Yeah. I just finished doing edits for a novelette that's coming out on Reactor Magazine in November. That's a kind of a near future dystopia thing, but and the editor there were like 3 or 4 places the editor queried. I mean, the editor was querying various things, but in 3 or 4 places they were like, I think maybe is this, could you do something a little more with this? And every time I would think, oh, wait, I could do a lot more with this. And then I would double it. I would just make it like way worse or way more or maybe more ridiculous, whatever. And it was always better, always. So that's isn't that the lesson?
That is the lesson.
Kate, just on that note, because this seems to mesh with what we're talking about, someone wrote, your Sun novels are so complex. How do you keep track of everything? What keeps you grounded in all the complexity?
I don't know. They pretty much broke my brain, but and I'm like halfway. I have about half of the third one written, but I kind of had to pause on it for various reasons. But I have I did different things. So first of all, I have the template of Alexander the Great's life and the secondary characters and the things that happen. And most everything can be, I use that very strongly, not one for one, but it means that I know where everything goes and I know the main arcs of most of the characters, some of whom are composites, some of whom are new, but even the characters who don't really exist in the original history have a function that follows something in that. So first of all, using history as a template to that degree is helpful because so that's my plot. And then I had, was it for Furious Heaven? I had a notebook that I divided with dividers, and then I had made an outline, and then I divided it by sections and which things, and then I just took 8.5 by 11 lined paper, and I would write like one thing on each one, they have to attack into a buried city, right? And then I would put that in the appropriate section, and then I just filled it out. And then I moved everything around to be the order, and then that it needed to be in. And so that actually was, even if I didn't really refer to it much later, I think the act of doing that organized in my brain. And then for the third book, Lady Chaos, I realized I tried to do that same thing, but it wasn't working. And I ended up grabbing Aeon Timeline, which is a program where you can do these long, complex, chronological, hyperlinked things with a lot of, it can be like, they reach the planet, and then you can list who's there and what planet it is and how it's related to some other. So it's all this hyperlinked stuff on a timeline. And they have different templates for it. And then I spent probably 2 months filling this thing out. And I kept thinking to myself, I need to start writing. But I knew that if I start writing, I would like run into obstacles. So I just did that. And that's how I did it. But also there are literally times when I think about, because there's so many strands and so many characters that it's like I can feel my brain like doing an extensive, like if it was doing like some kind of extensive workout, going like, wait, they're trying to scrape together, and then I just have to step back for an hour or a day and say and rest, because it's a lot. But I also love it. So, you know, I did it to myself. So I think that's the key. I love it. And I will make book 3 work. So it's the challenge, right? Isn't that what we love?
It's a challenge.
The challenge.
I want to write something easy sometime.
Yeah. Actually, The Witch Roads was easy, but that was my gift book. It was, I had hit a phase I hit a moment in my life where I thought maybe I should quit writing, and people will have heard this already. Some people will have heard this already, but I had a really, really dark month in 2022, and I really thought, what was the point anymore? I should just stop. And you understand. I know you understand because you've been there. And the book I needed to be working on, I couldn't even look at it, the one that was under contract. So I just was looking through my old files, and I found, I have lots of stubs of things that I've started writing, written 5,000 words on, 10,000 words on, and then, whatever, put aside for whatever reason. And I circled back to this one, which was in slightly different form. And I thought, well, what if I made the character a deputy courier, a humble person, rather than, someone in the upper echelons? What would happen if I took this kind of a world that I kind of know a little about and did that? And I just started writing it, and it just went. I mean, literally, it was like 2 things. It was like a gift. It was literally like a gift had been given to me, because I wrote 240,000 words in 6 months. And half of it I was making up as I went. I mean, my brain created, eventually, I knew how the plot was going to work, because my brain does that in the back now, because I have so much experience doing it. But I also felt like a grand piano had just fallen out of the sky and smashed into my brain and said, "Hi there." And it wasn't under contract, so there was no pressure. The pressure was I should be working on the book under contract, but I knew if I did that, I wouldn't write. So I had the choice of writing something or writing nothing. And I chose to write something, even though I shouldn't, right? I shouldn't be writing it. So I chose the gift.
Yes.
And it just happened like that. So so that one was easy. The one I'm writing now is not that easy. It's harder. The Third Son book is hard because it's so complicated. Furious Heaven was actually easy to write, weirdly. That's an incredibly complex book, but
Yeah.
I don't know why.
But it flows really well.
It just came together. What are your easiest and your hardest books to write that you can think of?
Cloud Roads was pretty easy. That was a kind of once I got going on it, it went pretty fast. I think I probably did it in maybe 10 months, 11 months, which is pretty fast for me. Hardest Network Effect was probably the hardest. It's hard comparing it to Witch King because they were both hard for different reasons. Once I figured out what I was doing with Witch King, it went pretty well. And I think I did it in under a year too. But Network Effect, it took me a year and a half, and most of the first year, it really felt like was me doing the first 50,000 words over and over again. Because it was one of those where it just would not reveal where it was supposed to start. And it just took a lot of writing the wrong thing over and over again before I kind of figured out where it started. And even though very clearly I knew what I wanted to have happen, but just the actual starting point of, and it's just like I would try to get started and would just like, ugh. And then some of it was okay, it would be okay, and I'd be going along and then realizing that this is just, no, it's not any good. So yeah, that was pretty difficult.
All right, I promised the audience we'd do some Murderbot talk. So Martha, you've spoken publicly about how writing the Murderbot diaries and the public response to SecUnit as a character, especially among neurodivergent folks, taught you more about yourself. If it's not too personal, could you talk about how you process that vulnerability and maintain your confidence as a writer?
Um, I don't know. Um, the I think I probably didn't when I was writing Murderbot. I didn't realize how much of myself I was putting into it because that really bitter sense of humor in the face of terrible things happening is definitely me. But having so many people tell me that this is how a neurodivergent person thinks, and this is how a person with autism thinks was or ADHD was a real surprise in some ways, and which it sounds funny. It's like me thinking, "What do you mean? It's not normal to be crippled with anxiety at all times." Um, but I don't know. I just feel like I've been a writer for so long, and I've worked so hard at trying to put more of myself on the page because and I'm sorry, I've had so many conversations with people today in the workshop, and um, I can't remember what I've said when, but stop me if I've said this before. Just like,
Well, I haven't heard it.
okay.
So,
But when I was first starting, I was first writing, I had a lot of trouble because every choice you make in writing is vulnerability. Even if you're writing a character that's not very much like yourself and in a made-up world, the choices you have that character make and the other characters and all your choices are you, and those and it's vulnerability, even though it may not seem like that to the reader at first, but there's a part of your brain that knows that this is you. And for me, it would show up in weird ways. Like I think in my second book, I was describing a character like getting dressed, and I couldn't do it. And it was and I really had to work at myself to get myself to do it. And it was just like, there was just something about it was just too much. And I feel like that's been a hurdle I've had to overcome because I have I have a lot of self-protective walls for various good reasons. And so, but as a writer, you have to get that out on the page and be vulnerable. And I think that's one of the reasons why I couldn't have written Murderbot any sooner in my career than I did, because I think it took me that long to kind of break through a little bit and really put myself into it. So I don't think that answers the question. I don't know. Did it? I have a long history of starting to talk and then forgetting what the question was.
well, I thought it was a good answer,
Okay.
but I also forgot what the question was. No,
Well, so someone else had asked, Murderbot's a character with such a strong voice and unique perspective. And what was the experience like when you moved from writing or sustaining its voice over the shorter novella length to the novel length? Were there any unexpected challenges or fun opportunities?
Not really. It was just the length of the story. The story. I wanted to write a longer story, and I knew that was a good way to get art back into Murderbot's story. So, and actually, I didn't think the novel would be that. It's maybe 100 and I think it's 110,000 words. It's a little bit over 100,000. I was aiming for like 80 or 90, and then and that's why I told my editor, and then it just kept getting bigger. And I would email him and say it's going to be bigger than it's going to be 85,000. He's like, I don't care, go ahead, just do it. And it was, and it would just, and I'd be like, okay, well, I'm at 100,000 now, and I'm not done. And he's like, that's fine. It's So yeah, it wasn't really the character that was any kind of a challenge. It was it was the first 50,000 words of where the stupid book was going to start. Um, and I almost think that's because I kind of knew really well how the emotional arc between Murderbot and Art was going to go. And so that was kind of making me think I understood more about what the actual progression of events would be. And I hadn't really figured out that I thought I had figured out more stuff than I actually had. But actually writing the character at any length, and that's kind of one of the problems because I can write Murderbot's voice just talking about anything, going grocery shopping, whatever. And so I'll write and write in that voice and think, okay, I'm doing the book, and then realize, no, this is not, the plot is not right. It doesn't feel right. I'm not getting it right. And have to start over.
Well, here's a slight shift. How do you navigate or cope with negative or unexpected responses to subject matter, particularly elements that are especially important to you?
I just tell them to F off. I mean, usually mentally, um, not out loud to their face. Because this was something also I talked about earlier, I think, today, is that um, coming from a background of being like a lonely kid that felt unwanted, especially in school, and I didn't realize this until I heard an actor talk about it in relation to their past and realized how much I had in common with them. But you end up realizing if you want to do anything, you have to just kind of do it and if people don't want you there, that's just too bad, um, and that kind of um, assumption, I don't know if it's an assumption where you get where this is what I want to do and I need to be in this environment to do it, and if those people don't want me there, that's too bad. I'm going to do it anyway. And so that works really well in publishing, where a lot of times people don't want you there and you just keep doing it anyway. And well, one of my friends talked about, I had my career crash, and she described it as, yeah, it's like if you had, you go into work every day and they fired you, but they don't tell you, and you keep going into work, and then eventually realize they're not paying you anymore. And that's what a writer with a career crash is. But
Yeah.
is that making sense? It's basically, I'm too mean and stubborn to worry about what other people are telling me, unless they do it in a way where it's clearly a reasonable objection. And then I feel like, well, you can have that objection. It's not gonna affect what I do because I don't agree with you. And then sometimes people will do criticism in a way where I'm like, oh yeah, they're right, because I think you always have to be open to being corrected, when realizing you've done something stupid or wrong or whatever. But I think you learn pretty early to tell the difference between someone who is coming in with a good faith
Yeah.
criticism of what you've done versus someone who's just like, well, I don't like that, so that means you're a bad person, that kind of thing.
I
So
think coming in at the time we did too, both as women into the SFNF field, that we had to, you kind of have to develop a thick skin, because there are people who really don't want you there, and not just for many reasons. There's people who
yes,
don't want you there, and it is hard. And sometimes people don't want to have to deal with that, which is completely understandable. I mean, in my case, there's really nothing else I can do. Like, I have no other skills. But I'm a youngest child. And so my way of dealing with it is often just, well, they're going to say what they're going to say, and I'm just going to keep on doing what I want to do. So it's pretty much pretty
Yeah.
similar. But
Yeah.
it's interesting for me. So with the really negative, negative reviews or people saying negative things, I find that I have two reactions. One, if there's a little piece of it that I, think, oh, probably right, it can really depress me. It's like, oh no, I'm never going to be any good, whatever. But if they complain about something that I'm absolutely dead certain I'm right about, I just don't care. I'm like, well, sorry they didn't like that,
Yeah.
but I'm right. So I swing between those two things. um,
I do some of that too. If you think that they're right, then it's really upsetting. And then you have to go talk to other people who's like, you just go to people whose opinion you actually respect and say, is this right? And they'll be like, no. And
no, yeah,
or maybe a little bit, but it's not like they're saying
that
or
way.
something. Yeah.
All right, I think this is going to be our last question. And a couple people were big fans of art, which is not a surprise. And, so I'm kind of combining two questions here because one person had asked, I adore this character. Will any future installments explore more about the university and its AI department? And someone else had asked, how has the controversial boom of the AI industry affected the way you think about constructs and AIs as characters?
I've answered this one before too, but real quickly, the AI thing. Murderbot and art are actual real sentient machine intelligences in the fictional world they're in. AI as we have it right now is not even close to anything like that. It's like the large language models, which is what we have that most people think of as AI, are not artificial intelligence. They are not like the fictional artificial intelligence. They are just pattern matching. And the patterns that they're draw all the material they draw in to match these patterns, they've made them really good at looking like they're actually communicating and thinking. But it's just putting together words in the same pattern that it is fed from all this stuff, which is why it'll have a nice conversation with someone and then suddenly tell them to kill themselves or put their hand in a garbage disposal, or that it's in love with them and it loves them so much so they should go kill themselves. It doesn't mean it. There's nothing in there to mean it. It's just other words. It's words it's scraped off the internet or been fed from books and stuff that it's put together in ways that sometimes show up. Which is also why I think one of the best examples of it is why it will make up references to authors, to books that don't exist by real authors. Because one of the patterns that we'll see a lot is, say, the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. And so and you'll see that in all these different patterns, The Witch Roads by Kate Elliott. So it can sit there and say, well, The Witch Roads by Martha Wells, the Murderbot Diaries by Kate Elliott, those are the same to it because it's the same pattern. And so that's why it comes up with so many books that, people didn't write, or it'll either make up the author or make up an author name or make up the book name, and come up with all this stuff because it's just patterns. I hope that's a good explanation. But it doesn't affect it really because it's, what I'm working in is fiction, is pure fiction. And it's just marketing, really.
Okay, I was told to throw just a very quick one at you to round us off here. So if you have one piece of advice for folks who are, newer writers trying to break out into the world, what would it be?
You want to go first?
Sure. Be kind to yourself. And by that I mean be kind. By that I mean be kind to yourself. You know, I say this all the time. Art is a gift. It's so human, and everyone is unique. So no one else, whatever your vision is, no one else can do it exactly like you do. It's art is tricky, it's challenging, and you know, the commercial market or whatever, the sending it out into the world for other people to read or listen to or however, it can be hard and challenging as well. And you can write, you know, for 6 months every day and then hit a patch of 4 months where you can't for whatever reason. And I just want people to I just want people to do their art and to find their voice and to be kind to themselves when things are going not as well as they wish, and to not listen to people who tell them that there are specific rules that they have to follow. And if they don't, they've somehow failed. You haven't failed. You know, you are unique in yourself, and that's what matters.
I agree with every word of that. That is fantastic advice. What I usually tell people is if you want to be a professional writer as your job, you have to kind of treat it like any other job you would aspire to. As is like learn as
Yeah.
much about the publishing industry as you can, so you won't be surprised or tricked. And there's so many scams out there aimed at beginning writers. It's just unbelievable. But to learn as much about how things work as you can, and there's a lot of information out there. And I always recommend the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association has a site called Writer Beware, which is about all the scams aimed at aspiring writers, and really kind of have that bookmarked so you can check it and see what the hazards are out there.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for tonight, for all of your time, or this afternoon, or whatever time you're joining us. And as we've said, we're recording this and we'll post it to our YouTube channel once we've had time to process it. But I want to wish our wonderful guests a lovely rest of their day. And thanks once again for such a great conversation.
Well, thank you all for being here, and
Yeah.
thanks to Clarion West for doing this.
Thank you. And this was a lot of fun.
Martha.
I enjoyed it.
Well, I always like chatting with you, Martha.
Yes, I always like chatting with you too.